Okay, we're looking at foreclosure properties. This is part 2. This is a long sort of explanation, and I appreciate that you're sticking with me on it. But honestly, I've seen so many people sort of just kind of touch on it, and it's worth diving deep into this, because if you understand the process and what's happening through the foreclosure process, you will actually be able to determine better whether it's, first of all, worth your while, because it is complicated and it takes a lot longer than a normal sale. And if it's not worth your while, then why do it? But it can be if you're looking for the right types of property in the right areas at the right time. And so this is a little bit of an explanation for that. What happens at this point? The lender has gotten an Order Nisi, which is essentially the courts telling the lender that they are now allowed to sell the property if the borrower doesn't come up with a set amount of funds in a certain amount of time. Okay, so let's just say that the 60 to 90 days has passed. The lender is now allowed to sell the house. So what happens then is the lender essentially has to go out and market this property just like any other house that's for sale out there, and the courts sort of oversee that. And in British Columbia, they're very specific about that. And the reason being, like, you have to understand that in Canada here, we don't do things like down in the United States. It's a lot more controlled. And what essentially is going on with the courts being involved with it so thoroughly is that the courts have determined that, look, in order to buy a home, it's difficult. And you need to first of all, you're going to have to put a down payment down. For anybody to lend you money on a house, you're going to have to put a down payment down. You're going to have paid some mortgage payments, most likely. Say you bought a house and for 2.5 years, everything was great. And then all of a sudden you lost your job, whatever, you couldn't make the payments anymore. And so the last 6 months, you haven't made any payments, but you have made 2.5 years of mortgage payments, and you put your initial down payment, and you're 3 years into owning this home. And in British Columbia, as we all know, that means that you've probably accrued some equity into the home. So just think, you initially bought $1 million home, you put $100,000 down, you've paid, say, in 2.5 years of making payments, you've maybe made another $30,000 worth of, I'm just using round numbers, $30,000 worth of payments to the house. Okay, so right there, that's $130,000 towards the $1 million, right? So really, the lender is only into it for $870,000 right now. Now, on top of that, in 3 years, the house has gained a significant amount of value in British Columbia, and that could be a lot. So maybe now the house is worth $1.5 million. Well, the bank has only owed $870,000 on that $1.5 million. So that means that the person being foreclosed on, the borrower, has a significant amount of equity, and the court system understands that. So even after you've paid your interest penalties, the legal fees, and the realtor, you could still be walking out with $250,000 worth of equity. And so if they just gave or granted an Order Absolute, which just transfers the property into the bank's name, well, then the borrower is actually out $250,000. And so which is significant, and even if it's a condo and it's, and those numbers are smaller, even if it's $20,000 or $30,000 or $10,000, the courts understand that if somebody's not able to even make their rent or their mortgage payment, that $10,000 can come in real handy. And so that is the whole reason that the courts are so significantly involved. Whereas if it's like in the States, where essentially the title just reverts back to the lender, well, that lender now not only gets the house, but gets all the equity, all of that extra money. And in Canada, we just don't think that it's fair, and I agree with it. And so that's just basically how it happens. So back to the process. You've got an Order Nisi, lender has an Order Nisi, puts up the for sale sign. Okay, now he has, or she, the institution, whatever, the bank, whatever it is, they have to hire a realtor. They have to market it in a way that would allow for full market value to be given to that house. Okay, that's the indication that happens through the court order. And one of the things that's going to happen is a third-party appraiser is going to be hired. So the court is going to have a good idea of what the value of that house is on the market today. Now, we all know that market value, like what somebody's willing to pay for a house, is not always the same as like an appraisal value or a CMA or anything like that. But it gives the court a really good idea of what we're aiming for right now. And so the lender will hire a realtor, and at that point it's marketed very similarly to any other house that's out there. And as a matter of fact, if you ever see a house marketed as a foreclosure property, there's actually a good chance that person is not following the rules properly, in the sense that, if you think about it, if you were to drive up to two houses that sat beside each other and they're identical and both were for sale, and one of them said just the for sale sign regular, and the other one said foreclosure property, in your mind, you may believe that the one that's being foreclosed on is not worth as much as the one that's just being sold regularly. And so and just for that, there is an argument from the person being foreclosed on later on. They could actually say to the court, in my opinion, now I've never actually seen this happen. I have seen other things happen where the judge has said no to a sale, or the JP rather, but in that case, I believe that the actual person being foreclosed on, they do have an argument that could say that, hey, this wasn't marketed at full value, and so we could get more money for this house. And it would be interesting to see actually if that worked or not. It's certainly an argument, and I would certainly say to somebody who is my client, hey, I would throw that out there and say, look, you got to market this better and see if you can get more money, because as soon as you say that word foreclosure in the marketing pamphlets, people are going to start thinking that house is actually worth less money, and for no good reason. It's no different than the house that was right next door. It's just that the person selling is in a different sort of state and has a different position, and that different position may actually make it harder to get full value for the house. All right, so we're gonna continue on into the next part. So follow me into part 3.